Hey everybody, welcome to the Power of Connection chat. I'm your host, Bobby Umar, and it's great to see you guys. It's been a while since I've done the Power of Connection chat, but I'm excited to have my friend and fellow entrepreneur, Peter Demangos. Say hello to everybody, Peter.
Hey Bobby, hey everyone.
All right,
Nice
excellent.
nice to be here.
We're delighted to have you, Peter. And so just for those who are joining us, I'm usually posting and hosting the Power of Connection broadcast on Mondays and Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we talk about topics around leadership, thought leadership, personal branding, entrepreneurship, career development. And I like to bring in awesome speakers and guests to interview, to share their perspective on different things, which is always a great thing. And today our topic is going to be on entrepreneurship in a post-COVID-19 world and how people can, and entrepreneurs can navigate this. Because I think we're all, some of us doing well, some of us are not. And so I think it's important for us to understand how that works. Part of logistics, guys, is we want to engage you. So we want you to be part of the conversation. So this is a chance for you to share a bit, ask questions. So we encourage all of you to comment below. Let us know where you're from. Let us know what kind of questions you have. Let us know what your situation is, what's going on with you, because we're trying to help you by answering as many questions as we can. If you like what you're hearing, you can tag people to join the conversation. You can share this on your own pages and invite people from your network to share. You can also like and clap and heart and light bulb and smiley face to let people know. But starting off, though, let us know, type below where you're from. Are you from North America, South America, Asia, Europe, Australia, Africa? Let us know where you're from. And then as we get into the topic, then you can start asking questions of Peter, because he's very knowledgeable and he's a great guy to help you on this journey. So let's start off, Peter, with tell everyone out there a bit about yourself in terms of kind of your journey and how you came to be where you are today.
Sure. So for me, it started about 12 years ago, just entering the business workforce. So I'm in my background business from a business perspective is HR and employee benefits, technology and consulting, sales, service. So to put that into some context, I started a brokerage on employee benefits about 12 years ago. What that does is basically we work with typically mid to large size firms where there was an HR team that existed, and we would implement, manage all their employee related benefits, communication, retirement programs, wellness plans, group insurance, health and dental, sort of what most people are probably familiar when it comes to their benefits. And my other business, which is a technology company called Collage, that was a technology platform, sort of like a human resource information system for the opposite end of the spectrum. So that was for the SMB market. So for those companies that did not typically have an HR support and were doing everything mostly through paper, they would use our platform to basically manage all their employees paperless. So both of those businesses I sold in the fall. I was pretty fortunate in the sense that the timing was just pure
great timing. Well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you. So fortunate in that sense. It was obviously the timing was right for the businesses based on the industries, and I won't bore you with sort of where the industries were heading and what was the catalyst for there. But like any business, you have to be attuned with where the market is heading, and we had some really great opportunities to sell to some really large organizations, so that made sense. And since then, I've been pretty much really involved with the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is a global organization of entrepreneurs, 14,000 members globally. We are about 1,000 plus in Canada. And we have about 150 or so in Toronto chapter, where I am the president currently. And right now we're spending a lot of time working with fellow entrepreneurs, trying to guide them through this crisis and what life looks like beyond that. Like no surprise to anyone, many of us, it's a challenge being an entrepreneur to begin with, and certainly a bigger challenge right now. So that's what the organization about, is just bringing a sense of community, helping each other in all of times, but certainly in these times right now.
It's interesting. I started thinking about the fact that you sold off your business, and I'm wondering, if I sold off an event company, I'm like, wow, I totally saved my butt there. But if I sold off a Zoom company, you're like, oh no, I could have made so much more because the stocks went up. So, but it's interesting to see that. And how are you doing with what's going on with you in terms of for you dealing with COVID and being at home, and what's going on with you there?
So I personally, I'm lucky in the sense that I have an 8-month-old daughter. So the silver lining for me and my wife has been spending time with our little princess, which has been great. She's definitely been spoiled, and I think our next children are not going to have the same mommy daddy time that she has. That's for sure. But it's been interesting. I mean, like any of us, it takes a toll mentally. To what extreme? I mean, it's going to vary on everybody and the financial circumstance and how you spend your time. But I mean, it's obvious that being locked in for a couple months regardless how good things can be. And I think I'm fortunate in the sense that I exited businesses prior to, so there's a certain level of stress that I otherwise was able to sidestep. But still, I mean, like any of us, we want to get out and do things. We want to be active, and as entrepreneurs, especially, we want to be out there, doing things. So it's been challenging to say the least, but I'm hopeful, seeing how we're slowly starting to reopen, and if we can do it methodically, I think, we're all going to be better for it shortly. So, I mean, we're making by, like most of us, we have to.
So as you're talking to the people from your entrepreneurs organization and the Toronto chapter, even abroad, what are some of the things that they are looking for help with? Like, what are some of the challenges they're facing?
Yeah, so initially, no surprise, it was cash. For a lot of
Sure.
businesses, it was managing their employees, and there's a lot of unknown around that. So cash is the ultimate way to be able to keep things afloat, to bridge through this period of uncertainty, with the ultimate goal of getting back to as much as pre-COVID as possible. Now, certain industries have been cleansed out, and maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, and it's probably inevitable anyway. But if we take the other industries or other businesses that are completely suffering as a direct connection to COVID, those ones, it was all about getting cash enough to bridge the gap, keep my people employed, and then have things resume, as quickly as possible. So it's access to cash from government, access to cash and liquidity line of credits and so forth from our banking institutions. And then, obviously looking for your employees and your suppliers and customers to have some concessions to a certain extent, whether it's deferring of payments or whatever it may be, working with the people closely to the organization to find ways to manage cash flow. That for sure was the biggest priority. What we're seeing now, the ones especially that have been able to bridge some of that, and I think the government has done a fairly decent job, maybe not at the beginning, but I think now, I think most can agree they've done a fairly decent job, with the exception of maybe cash not getting to businesses as quickly. The concept of what they've done, I think, has been, a fairly decent job. So now at this point, for those that have been able to slowly come out of it, in every business and industry, they're going to have certain ones are going to be lagging more than others. Now it's about, how do I reinvent my business to survive post-COVID? Because people are realizing, at least what we've seen from our entrepreneurs organization, that it might not make sense to go back to exactly how things were done before, because the world now has changed. The behaviors of employees, consumers, suppliers have changed. So there's a lot of thought around, what does that look like, and what steps as a leader do I need to take? And I would say that creates a lot of uncertainty for business leaders. Many of us knew how to run our business a certain way. Now we're being asked to be different leaders, different managers, and transfer that down to our middle management and our employees. So it's not as obvious as going back to normal. It's going back to whatever the new might be.
Now, we already have a question. There's people calling in. So Kevin's from USA, Nuster from Canada, Saul from Toronto. So if you are joining us, we're talking to Peter Demangos, the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization Toronto chapter. He's got some incredible insights into entrepreneurship and business for business owners. So ask your questions. So we invite you to ask your questions as part of this. We're discussing how entrepreneurs are managing and handling COVID-19. And one of the questions is from Saul. He says, selling, is cold calling dead or just on pause? What's your take on that?
So, hey, Saul, thanks for the question. Definitely not dead. It wasn't dead before COVID. Certainly isn't dead now, current, and probably won't be dead post. So a lot of my experience in sales and service, in my businesses, has been sales and service. And I've been a huge advocate, and our sales team has been a huge advocate of, call it old school, but it works. You're picking up the phone, calling people. I think now more than ever, in an area where we're seeing less people, picking up the phone, and it's easy, rather, I should say, to hide behind an email. Now more than ever, where we're lacking that human connection, to be able to pick up the phone and call somebody and have that connection, I think can go even further than it was going before. Now, I think we obviously have to take everything with a grain of salt. We have to look at the cost to acquire a customer. How many conversations do we need to have to get the customer? What does it look like post-conversation? So it depends on the business. If the lifetime value of a customer is great and you only need a smaller number of customers, then picking up the phone, in addition to many touch points, is going to be successful. Whereas we looked at one point, my one business in technology, we found that leveraging social media platforms was more advantageous, targeting a certain segment of businesses, because we had to adjust for our cost to acquire. We felt it's cheaper to acquire through Facebook ads than it would be to pick up the phone and call. But it's going to depend, obviously, business by business. However, if your business, if you know that cold calling could work in your business, I would not drop it as a result of the situation we're in. I would probably go further into it.
Okay, awesome. Well, I want to talk about briefly about the, you mentioned the cash flow challenge that people are having. So can you talk a bit about, what are some of the things that people have been doing, or they should be doing, or can be doing to deal with that?
Yeah, so the first one that we're seeing, working with suppliers and customers, so specifically suppliers asking for more extended payment terms. That includes your tenant, your landlord, if you're a tenant. Now in Canada, we have subsidies for tenants. That is in the control of the landlord, which I think has been problematic to many entrepreneurs, that the decision is on the landlord and not the tenant, who potentially is the entrepreneur. So definitely speaking with suppliers and extending, recognizing that, not that we want to put them in a difficult position, but many times they also don't have an alternative right now either. So we don't want to threaten them. That's certainly not what I'm saying. But I think both parties need to recognize that they're in a very unique situation. So renegotiating arrangements, we've seen a lot of that from our entrepreneur members. And similarly with customers. We have to be prepared to do that with customers as well, who are seeking the same thing, and just having that open dialogue. Not everyone is feeling the pain the exact same way. So to assume that everyone is feeling it the same way, and to give everybody the same credit, or to ask for the same favor from every supplier, my opinion is not the way to do it, because that's a way to waste money. But if we spend the time to have conversations with customers, suppliers, and see who needs money and how we can come up with a solution, that to me has been what I've witnessed to be the most effective way to doing it. It's a little bit more time consuming, but ultimately, especially if you're talking with customers, this is a great opportunity to build a stronger relationship. You're kind of killing two birds with one stone. You're talking about, you're able to overcome cash flow challenges, but you're also developing a deeper relationship with the customer. So I would not overcomplicate it. Talk to the people that is keeping the business alive, suppliers, customers, employees, and have real person conversation. And then, we've seen some excellent results of that.
Right. And I also like what you mentioned about, what the governments are doing. I think that they've done a pretty good job for the most part, coming up with creative ways to support businesses and all that, which is nice. I think the one area that I'm looking for more support on, and maybe you can help me understand this one, because for me, I run a startup and I run a business, but the people that I hire are contractors. And so they offered support to subsidize people that were, salaried employees. But a lot of startups, particularly those with less than 10 employees, often the people are contractors. And so, I'm trying to find a way I haven't seen any sort of news around that. That's something I would like. I would like some sort of support to help me with the two contractors that I have, because right now I don't, and I basically had to let them go or lower their hours. So I'm not sure that's coming down the pipeline, or if you've heard people say that, but that's kind of where I'm at. But my question is, do you think my question is twofold. One is, do you think that's coming down the pipeline, and there might be support for that? And number two, what are some other things you think that the government could do to help support entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I think this is a great question. It's a great problem you've isolated, and one that as an entrepreneur community, we've consistently been trying to hammer to our government that this is a segment that is being missed. It got better when they announced $250 million to the startup world. It doesn't solve the problem that you're talking about precisely. So that gap still exists. And it's exactly what you're talking about. A large chunk of our entrepreneur community, the business owner community, is basically trying, and rightfully so, tries to be very efficient and outsource the things that are not their core competency. And with the likes of Shopify and Amazon and to name a few of the obvious ones, but there are tons of third-party services that as an entrepreneur you can leverage and not have to bring on employees like we did maybe 20, 30 years ago. So what you've described is a very real scenario of many entrepreneurs where they're 1, 2, maybe 3 people, but they have contractor and third-party bases of maybe 5 to 10 parties that they've involved with, in your case, contractors, that is completely missed in this scenario. And without cash flow, they still have their fixed costs they need to account for, this solo entrepreneur, for example. And without subsidies from the government, they're unable to accomplish it. So I wish I had an answer, a good one for you, as far as what we think the government's going to do. We hope that they're going to do a better job to address it, but I'm fearful for that particular segment of the entrepreneur, to be quite honest.
Is there anything you're doing in terms of lobbying, and is there anything we can do to kind of lobby and push for this, a petition to get this type of, like, where do we make our voices known that please help entrepreneurs, particularly in the situation that I described?
Yeah, so the biggest lobby group that I can think of is CFIB, the Canadian Federal
Yes.
Business Owners. Entrepreneurs Organization, we're not a lobby group. We're more about helping the entrepreneur. So we're a forum. It's kind of like a board of directors. It's basically very confidential organization. We come together, we help each other, similar to having a board of directors of your own business. But for the SMB market, it's maybe on average, we're about 20 to 50 employees. So you don't have a board of director, typically a company that size. So our group is a little more different. We support each other through our network and through sharing resources. So we don't lobby, but I would say CFIB and there are obviously some other ones that are doing their part to lobby. And I think conversations like this that we're having, for people to continue to voice their opinion on social media platforms or to their local government, their local ward government, where they can actually have some sort of an impact that trickles through. But I think we have to be vocal about these things because it is having an impact.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you're right. Doing this talk is one of the ways we're going to bring a voice to entrepreneurs and get out there that, we're looking for support, we're looking for help, and to call on the governments and supporting bodies to help out in that area. So I think that's great. We have a few more questions in the feed, which is great. One's from John Molnar. Another one's from David Kincaid. All right, good to see you, David. So let's go with John's question. Being in the hospitality business that has been heavily damaged by COVID-19, what is the best message to cold call with while avoid looking insensitive to the current market conditions? Relationships are all we are trying to build, as most of us are trying to survive rather than spend.
So the hospitality business, like hotel, or are we talking?
It doesn't say, it just says hospitality business. So, and the question was, what is the best message to cold call with while avoiding looking insensitive to the current market conditions?
Yeah, so I give my feedback on certain tactics we use. So, take it with a grain of salt. And I'll give you sort of categorically what worked when we were cold calling. And I had a team of, at our largest day, we had 15 people just on the phone cold calling. And what was most effective for my team, I told them, quite frankly, to be honest, I think we all have in our lifetime been inundated with some level of a cold call. So the sooner we can get to what we're calling for and being forthcoming with what the elephant in the room might be. So, for example, as I was growing my business and we were selling.
I'm sorry, by the way, he said restaurant industry.
Oh, restaurant industry. Okay, yeah, okay. Thank you. And I think this probably applies to anything, specifically to the cold call. So for what it's worth, when we were pitching our services, the elephant in the room for us as we were growing was the fact that we were a smaller boutique firm in the early stages compared to the big, behemoth that existed. So I led with that. And rather than hiding that insecurity, I led with why we were a better provider for our customer than the big behemoth company that they've known. So I would say my feedback would be to do the same. Lead with the insecurity, which might be in light of what's happening with COVID or the sensitivity that was referenced, leading with that and recognizing that, I know this is a tough time right now and for X, Y, and Z. However, this is the value that we're bringing forward and why we could help. I think the sooner that as a sales force, we can address that sensitivity or the elephant in the room, the better. Because I always would tell my team, you have to assume that the other person who's on that phone is thinking about that sensitivity or that insecurity or that problem. So if you're talking for 5 minutes and you don't address that, they really haven't heard what you said. They've just been focused on that insecurity or that sensitivity. So whatever it is, whatever industry you're in, my feedback has always been lead with what you think the customer is most concerned with. Get that off the table, then you can continue with an honest conversation.
No, I totally agree with that. I think it's really important for us to actually acknowledge what's going on because, this is the biggest water cooler moment of our lifetime. So everyone is thinking about it. Everyone's impacted. We all know someone, and we know many people are impacted. So yeah, you cannot escape this. I can't think of a single moment in history where people are not, where everyone is not affected in some way. Like nothing compares to this in my mind. So, I think it's really powerful to acknowledge that and get past that initially. Same with all I've been doing all these Power Connection broadcasts since COVID. And, every single one, we talk 10, 15 minutes about how it's impacting us. Like it's just normally something we have to talk about because, I'm home too, and I'm working from home. My kid's in the other room. My wife's over there. Like we're all trying to figure this out. Another question from David Kincaid, who says, do you think customers are as willing to create or develop relationships virtually?
That's a great question. And I want to try and tackle it from the world that I know, because I can't claim to be an expert in every industry. So from my world it was kind of split into two. One was a technology company where we did everything virtually, and the other was a consulting firm where we did everything by shaking hand and meeting face to face. So let me look at that business, because obviously that's the other one that's already technology and virtual probably doesn't apply. So the one that was consulting in face-to-face environment, I think there is an opportunity for that to still succeed virtually, or technology to enable that experience. I don't think industries where there needs to be a physical component and meeting face-to-face, develop that trust, I don't think those are going to go away. I just think technology is going to enable them. And it could be technology that enables the sales process behind the scenes or the sales process post-meeting. So it may eliminate the need for many face-to-face interactions. But I ultimately don't think that certain key industries, and I'll speak to employee benefits, which is in the world of insurance and financial services, there's a level of trust and respect and accountability that goes into that. Being able to have that conversation and build that relationship, I don't think it's replaced with technology. But I will say a lot of companies in our industry are putting tons of money towards technology to make every other aspect of the consumer relationship or the service that much easier, so we can be able to reduce the cost on all those other peripheral areas. So I hope that addresses the question. I don't think it's replaced, but I think technology is going to help enable those industries.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think that the first month of COVID there's a lot of wait and see, and there are people trying to figure things out. But now that we're kind of gearing up for a longer term, and we don't know when it's going to end, we're all realizing that virtual connections and talking to people and having these meetings is really important. The second thing that's happening that I'm finding is that when I do Zoom calls or Zoom, whether it's Zoom, Google Hangout, FaceTime, whatever video calls that I'm doing, it's actually pretty interesting that you get I think you get a deeper connection than when I would meet someone at a Starbucks for coffee, because I'm inviting you into my house, into my home. Like right behind me, there's my family flag, the team owner flag, right? That's a very personal thing that we have. And so people sometimes comment, "Hey, what is that flag all about?" "Oh, that's my family flag, and there's my family values." And this is my home. I did a couple of video calls in my son's room, and all those decorations are behind me. So and there's an intimacy here and a vulnerability here that I think connects people, and I think it's a great opportunity to really connect us. And because we're all some of us have seriously. I mean, if you really want to have a great video conference call with me, you should have strategically had your daughter just come in and just show up and where did you come from? Oh my goodness, daughter, get out of here! Come on, silly little ragamuffin. But we'll do that next time. That's great. No, but I do appreciate that. I think it's something that
your comment I think is spot on. I think there's still value in the face-to-face, and maybe the telephone gets replaced with virtual. But if you can get access, to your point, into someone's personal life through a virtual call, I think that's a relationship moving one step forward beyond what just a phone call can do. So, and this is what I mean, the technology this type of technology will enable that relationship. So rather than, a lot of industries, they have certain service calls that may be periodic, quarterly. So we would do quarterly touch points, proactive touch points. We were very reactive as a service provider, but we did have proactive touch points. And we would do those typically through email and on a phone call. Whereas now we're going to be doing all of those, our industry should be doing all of these through a virtual space where you get access in the person's home. So that's what I mean. It's taking that touch point and just making it that much better enabled through technology.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's great. And we're talking to Peter Demangos, the president of the Entrepreneurs Organization Toronto chapter. We're talking about how entrepreneurship is changing, evolving in the COVID-19 world. So if you are joining us for the Power Connection broadcast, we're here every Monday and Wednesdays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. A couple of quick announcements before we keep going. One is that I'm doing a webinar actually tomorrow on how to boost up your LinkedIn profile as a thought leader. So I have on LinkedIn, I have 35,000 followers on my profile page. I have another 20,000 followers on my company page. I'm going to share some of my best LinkedIn tactics on a free webinar. You can find out about it just by going to my profile, because I'll talk about it incessantly, as well as on Twitter. Secondly, the DYPB is launching our first Toronto LinkedIn local meetup that's virtual. It's going to be on June 10th. It's going to be on cybersecurity, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and how we're handling the new era. So we have this amazing panel of 4 really expert speakers from across North America. It's going to be amazing. So check that out. Moving on, you mentioned before about pivoting and reinventing the wheel. So, what are some of the things that, entrepreneurs are doing or can be doing under that thing? What are some of the solutions or suggestions you have for them? And I'll share my own personal experience. I'm a speaker and trainer, so all my speaking training is gone, right? It's gone until the first one is in September. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, it'll be moved. But what I'm pivoting by knowing my skills as a video guy, as a speaker guy. I'm helping people build thought leadership brands on LinkedIn, doing video content, and helping with their personal brands. And helping them transition. That's what I'm doing as a coach and consultant now, as opposed to being a speaker. So what are some entrepreneurs doing in terms of pivoting, and what are some things they can do to do that better?
Yeah, it's a great point. So I think from a macroeconomic standpoint, to me, there are 2 main trends. One is, and these may not be a surprise to everyone, is the sense of deglobalization as a result of COVID-19, and whether it's trade negotiation challenges. I think a lot of people have recognized that they have to be less dependent on a supply chain that extends too far, where if that gets cut, like we saw in COVID-19, now you're kind of left high and dry and you don't have supply to service your customers. So I think people are trying to bring some of that a little bit closer. So if you're in the manufacturing space, or if you are in retail, I have friends, entrepreneurs that are in retail for clothing. A lot of stuff would otherwise been shipped from overseas. Now they're trying to find solutions, maybe not as their main supplier, but they're trying to find backups, plan A's, B's, and C's to be able to accommodate the customer. So I think that, to me, is an obvious trend. And the other one is e-commerce. So similar to what, or call it technology, virtual, and to your point about taking your events online, I think every business has to recognize that they need to bring on technology, or they need to be able to provide their services online. E-commerce is a more obvious one that's been trending anyway, and I think that has definitely seen a shot to the system in a very positive way in the last couple months. So I think what COVID has done has pushed what I think was happening anyway. It's pushed it a little bit sooner. So those, to me, are the main big macro categories: is taking things online. And then obviously some level of deglobalization, where we need to have plan A, plan B, C's, and so forth to continue our business. So less dependency on providers that are very far. Now, on a more immediate level, so when we look at managing our teams, I think it's inevitable that we need to provide flexibility to the way we grow our business. And I think managers are going to have to think differently in how they manage their employees. So it's going to be less about optics and more about metrics and results. So, as a business owner, I have to be appreciative of the fact that my employees now are probably going to want to work to a certain extent at home, or they've certainly proved that they're capable of working from home. So I have to be able to bring that into the new norm. And I think our sense of workforce, or the 9 to 5, is kind of going to go by the wayside. I think it's going to be more intertwined with personal life. To what extent that looks like, I don't know, and to what industry it affects more or less. I mean, those obviously are probably more in the service end anyway, and probably physical manufacturing, or you can't replace people that need to be on the floor shop. But there's going to be an expectation to a certain extent to accommodate that flexibility. So it's going to change the way the workforce operates, and it's going to change how we need to create expectations from employees. So to come back a little full circle on this, there's probably going to be technologies that most companies are leveraging more now from a performance management standpoint, or an employee optimization standpoint, where I know the output of my employee without having been in the office with him and her all day. but because I know that the files that we're sharing, these are all the items that they've completed. So I think having that supportive technology is going to be critical, because I, as a business owner, as I continue to attract and retain talent, I need to provide these flexibilities. So those are kind of the main three areas. So macro, and then sort of internally looking, that stand out to me that I think we're going to have to be mindful of. I mean, the rest, we're all going to have to kind of see how it plays out. I think it's a new reality for a lot of us, and we have to be quick. And I think that would be the other thing, to be conscious or mindful as of entrepreneurs. Now more than ever, we can't be set in the way that we do things. We have to be more open to change, and change quickly more than ever. Because I think as all this data comes in, we have to be capable and set up as an organization to take it and apply it. But if we're rigid in the way that or we're averse to change, or we wanted things to go back exactly to the way we were before, I think there's a sad reality that will come out of that. So I'd say the characteristic that an entrepreneur should have now more than others, just very open-mindedness, and just take in information as much as possible. Try and see what people and customers, suppliers are needing and asking for, and be in the best position to try and to tackle that. Now, I know that sounds like high level and fluff and so forth, but I will admit, as a business owner, there were moments where I was very rigid to change, because I knew what was working, and I knew I had a longer time horizon to make a shift. Now the time horizons have shrunken, so I don't have the luxury to just wait around as much as I could before, because someone is out to try and take my lunch in this new environment. So I need to be much more open-minded than I maybe would have needed to in the past.
Yeah, and a couple of things you said kind of resonate with me. One is the idea of being willing to be open about things. I mean, we look at the whole idea that I think about the idea that we need to be more mindful of, how do I make my business pandemic proof, right? And now I have to start thinking about everything. Everyone of us should be thinking about some sort of virtual online presence that is there, that they can use if they need to, and not rely on having to have physical presence with people. I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Now, why don't you tell us a little bit more about EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, Toronto chapter, even the national chapter. Tell us a bit more about who you are and what you guys are doing, and how has it been in your role as president this past year?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. I'd love to. I've been a member of EO for 8 years, so it's very dear to my heart as an organization, and I don't think I would have the perspective as an entrepreneur that I do today without having that. So basically, Entrepreneur Organization is an organization, 14,000 members globally, about 1,000 in Canada. The requirement to join EO is to have a recurring revenue business of greater than 1 million USD. So the average size company in the business is usually about 5 to 6 million in recurring revenue. Now, we do have an accelerator program for businesses that are between 250,000 recurring revenue up to $1 million. So we have sort of an incubator accelerator program where we provide a lot of resources to try and get them over to the $1 million mark. And I think that $1 million has been created, and that's the global requirement for all the chapters across the world. And it's usually a tipping point. $1 million, usually you've outgrown a lot of the startup risk, and you've survived a lot of the startup hustle. You're certainly at a point where you have to stay crafty and have to maneuver, but you've basically proven that you got out of the first little tranche. So, and that's typically where you now have employees, 10, 15, 20 employees, call it on average. So you have different challenges, employee challenges, you have cash flow issues. You're thinking about growing my business, and what industries, what other areas and markets should I focus on? So there are challenges beyond just the solo entrepreneur. So this is why I think, or why I've seen specifically, especially rather, the value of EO is because now I get to tap into other business entrepreneurs, and we are in a forum of non-competing businesses, and we get to tap into the minds of other businesses, sharing confidentially through experiences only. So that's the unique thing about EO, is we don't give anybody advice, because I think that's just a terrible way, and we only share the experiences that we've lived. So, and I hope I was trying to do that today as well, is through my experience and my lens and the businesses that I had. Well, this is what I gained from that experience when I had to hire an executive or fire, or had cash flow issues or whatever it is, or getting credits from my bank. So we share those experiences and we learn from each other. So having that, those data points to be able then to take in as an entrepreneur, to apply to my business, it just gives me a fast track and allows me to avoid decisions and mistakes that I otherwise would have had I not had that experience opportunity. So, and then on top of that, we do some pretty wicked events as well, which have been pulled back now because of COVID-19. So there's definitely a strong social aspect to it, but it's a tremendous organization. To your other question about the presidency, which I've been for the past year now, it's been a challenge in the sense that we all got a rude awakening with COVID-19, and it derailed our plans and the value we were bringing as far as events and so forth that we had planned. But I think it brought us a lot closer together. Right? What we realized, and to your point too, about having a little bit of that intimacy of peeking into people's homes and seeing their family life, it brought us together. We recognized that we're all have to get through this together, and through this ecosystem, we've been supporting and sharing resources. So what's unique about any organization, not just EO, I think if as a business owner, I would say highly recommend plug into some organization where you can tap into a greater network larger than yours. More so for the mind share. Yes, there's going to be opportunities to do business, but I would say if you tap into it authentically for the mind share and resource share, you're going to get so much out of it. And I'll give you examples in our organization where we have WhatsApp groups and so forth that we chat. And we're sharing resources. People need new manufacturers. So I spoke to that a little bit before and saying, who has a manufacturer in Canada for XYZ product? And people are jumping up saying, talk to this person, and solve this problem. Or who needs masks, for example, to get their employees back to work. And we're supporting each other with resources. So that's, probably EO is a great example of that, but there are other organizations, I'm sure, too. So at the very least, as business owners, plug into these type of networks that are tremendously valuable. And I can't say enough, especially about the Entrepreneurs Organization. So check that out. If you qualify, if not, and you're in the 250,000 to $1 million in revenue, reach out to us as well. We have an amazing accelerator program. We can help you get to the next milestone of breaking the $1 million.
That's awesome. And so where can people reach out to you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, so my email is pdemangos@gmail.com. So anyone can send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest as well. Just Peter Demangos. Not that many people with that last name, so you'll probably not have trouble finding me. And on Facebook as well.
Well, have you ever Googled yourself, Peter? What shows up?
I have. I try not to do it too often, but I have. So recently, there's a lot of activity with EO. I mean, we've been picked up on a few networks in light of what's happening. I mean, people want to hear the voice of the entrepreneur, but I try not to Google myself otherwise.
Well, there's no other Peter Demangos out there. Like I'll tell you right now, there's one Bob Umer. He's in the Philippines, and there's one. And he and I are quite prolific in our Google SEO searches.
Oh, really?
There's just two of us. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to say I'm just one that I'm aware of.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I want to thank you, Peter, for taking the time to join us today, and hopefully we'll be able to get Praveen and you again on another call in the future as we do this. I'd love to have you guys join us and talk more about entrepreneurship. I think that entrepreneurs are a lifeblood. And startups are a lifeblood of the economic engine. I think it's really important for us to find ways to help them survive and help them grow, and not have these big gigantic companies take over everything. So I hope that we can have more people like you and your organization helping support these entrepreneurial organizations. I think it's really important. So thank you so much for that. I do appreciate it.
Thanks, Bobby. It was a pleasure to be on. I hope the viewers got lots of value, and I'm happy to continue to be a resource. So thank you for what you do as well, and having this broadcast available to be able to have these conversations. So I think it's great.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Happy to do that. So if anyone else, you want to join us next time, we're on Power Connection broadcast on Mondays and Wednesdays, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please connect with Peter and the Entrepreneur Organization and join their chapters or find out more about them. They're a great organization. Connect with them, ask them lots of questions. And again, if you need anything from me, let me know. I'm also doing a lot of stuff too, doing webinars and trainings and LinkedIn Live. So I'm happy to be part of this. And we'll be back next week on Monday with another guest interview. And wish you all the best. Have a safe week and take care. Thanks so much.